Hey Kev, let's follow this trail over here. This looks like there might be something waiting down there.
All right. Hey, wait a minute. Do you hear that?
Yeah, I thought it was just me. What the heck is that?
I don't know what that is. Whoa, do you smell that too?
That's unbelievable. Hey, look.
What the?
Hey, look, those branches are moving over there.
What the heck is that?
Holy cow, is that what I think it is? Look at that thing.
Oh my God.
It's a freaking Sasquatch. Welcome to the Bigfoot Terror in the Woods Sightings and Encounters podcast. I'm your host, W.J. Sheehan, author of the series of books, Bigfoot Terror in the Woods Sightings and Encounters, 38 volumes in paperback, ebook, audiobook, and Kindle. And you can get them with great ease on our website, BigfootTerrorInTheWoods.com. Hit the books button, and there are viable links to whatever volume or format you're looking for. Take you right over to Amazon, and you can pick up a copy or 10. And also check out our shop. A lot of cool stuff in there, mugs, bumper stickers or bumper magnets, hats, all kinds of stuff on there. So have at it, folks. And now may I introduce you to my brother and co-host, KJ Sheehan. Kev, how are you?
I'm doing great, Bill. And by the way, the website also has been updated to show a bunch of those episodes that disappeared from the episodes link. So,
Oh, that's cool.
I don't know what happened, but they're fixed. I put them all back in.
Okay. Sounds good. Disappearing episodes.
Exactly. But it is cold here in North Carolina, Bill. I know it's not as cold as some other parts of the country, but I'm sitting here at my desk and I got a blanket over my legs for the first time that I can remember. So
yeah, I keep the house pretty warm. I keep the heat up, and I hear my coworkers saying I leave my house at 68, 69. I'm like, I wouldn't even think of it. 68. If you were in Florida, it was 68 out, you'd have a down coat on.
Mine is colder than that, but that's because my wife likes it cold.
Wow.
Otherwise, I would have it toasty. I always tease her that now I know why, in those old movies like, Ebenezer Scrooge or Christmas Carol where they had that stocking cap on, with my bald head. I need a stocking cap sometimes.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, you're creating the outside in your house.
Well, not quite that. It's about
Yeah, I'm just saying,
20 degrees and
mean,
blowing a gale here. So
yeah, you turn some big fans on, some of those movie set fans.
Exactly.
Unbelievable, man. No, I like it. I like it warm. So be it.
Cool. But other than that, we're good. What kind of Bigfoot accounts you have for us today?
Well, I got something really cool here, and it's funny. I was interviewing a fellow just last night, actually the night before last, in Arizona. Now, this fella, Dietrich Hildebrand, is a resident of Arizona, but this account actually occurred while he was hunting in New Mexico. And it's funny because the guy I was interviewing the other night now lives in Santa Fe. So there's a little parody going on there between this sighting and the guy living in Arizona and hunting in New Mexico and the fellow I was interviewing. But so listen to what Dietrich had to share. This is really incredible. He said, my partner Kyle Lawson and I were meeting up with 4 other hunters at a cabin in New Mexico for an elk hunt. This cabin belonged to one of the other members, all of us being bow hunters, built in an area that had several dirt access roads used by us to get closer to places where we would inevitably stalk on foot, bugling, and getting hopefully into position for a kill shot with the bow. Having got to the cabin and after all of the meet and greet, we hit the hay and got an early start before sunrise, heading out into the property in 3 different pickup trucks, 2 hunters in each truck. This area was primarily low-lying hills covered in tan-colored grass with clusters and patches of what I would call scrub pines everywhere, some of them pretty thick to navigate in. The hunt consisted of going into an area via truck, hiking in pairs and bugling for bulls, followed by breaking up into singles to get into position for a shot, hopefully. On the first day, none of the groups had scored from sunup to sundown. It was 100 degrees, and we had heard a lot of bulls, but our theory was, for whatever reason, they were not coming out into the open. We blamed it on the heat. So the second day actually was a repeat of the previous day, with Kyle and I returning to where we had been the last day. At one point we had separated, and I was glassing a bull at about 100 yards. My effective range with the bow was probably between 30 and 40 yards, and I was trying to maneuver through the scrub while hoping the bull would also come closer. The spot I now found myself in was a cluster of scrub pines. I was watching this bull through a window in the branches of this particular tree. The bull was in an irregularly shaped grassy patch off to my right-hand side. And it was then that I saw a significant black shape moving within another cluster of trees directly to my left-hand side, also across this grassy area. I could not make it out, simply being a dark mass within the shadows and confines of this cluster of pines. These trees had tightly packed clumps of foliage on their branches. When growing together in a group, one could go and sit inside in virtual darkness within them, peering out through the sides, precisely whatever I was looking at was doing at the time. So he's talking about this dark mass in the tree. I couldn't make out a single detail relative to its overall shape or size, but to me, at the very least, it had the mass or size of, say, a very large bear. Now, Kyle was several hundred yards away, and the others were miles away. There were no other hunters whatsoever where I was. I decided to focus on this bull and did a bugle. The bull responded, and it decided to move further away from my position rather than coming closer. Just after that happened, I looked back at the cluster where this shadowy figure was, and to me, it was gone. I didn't see anything leave, but it could have easily slipped out the back door, so to speak, through the many trees behind it and surrounding it. As planned, Kyle met up with me in the truck late in the day, and we returned to the cabin. We had discussed the day and what I had seen, which was overshadowed by one of the others having scored a nice bull during the day. That night, it actually rained heavily. In the morning, the dirt road was a quagmire of red mud, once again leaving at the break of dawn. Kyle and I were back in the same area, knowing now that big animals were there and hoping our luck would change for the better, so we parked, hiking together on foot into the surrounding area. We still followed the road when we found giant footprints in the mud, already starting to dry as the day grew warmer. The temperature at the time was at least 90 degrees and warming. There were several of these prints of what appeared to be a large bare foot, albeit they were in no way perfectly formed in this mud. We were wondering if they had been some messy tracks laid down by a bear, with our previous day's conversation about what I had seen being about the same critter, but I wasn't buying it at the time. I didn't say anything to Kyle, but I was already leaning towards the theory of Bigfoot. I knew of Bigfoot and was uncertain of Kyle's mindset about such things, having never discussed it with him, so I kept my thoughts to myself at the time. It was about an hour later, bugling and walking, that the two of us split up again, and I wound up very close to where I had been on the previous day. It was, in fact, about midday when I then saw a bull at about 60 yards eating grass in one of the openings. I was stalking slowly and trying to position myself for a shot using the trees as cover, when finally I was estimating my yardage at about 35 and put my arrow in place, drawing back on the bow. I let it fly and hit the bull broadside, watching as it ran into the trees. Bill, my heart was racing, and I was alone. It wasn't a great shot, but I believed it was enough to take him down, which it did, finding him later in the day with Kyle and now butchering him well into the darkness. I sat there with my heart racing, overjoyed with my good fortune at scoring a solid bull at close range. About 10 minutes had passed. Without warning, a Bigfoot comes out from within the trees at about 75 yards from where we sat, now walking along the edge of the grass and then ducking back into the trees. The entire sighting lasted maybe 15 seconds at best. I don't know if it was there watching me take the bull, but it was moving in the direction the bull had run away. This creature was not massive as far as Bigfoot sightings go. I estimated at 6 to 7 feet tall, black from head to toe, and about the size of a 300 to 400 pound man, with long arms and big feet, just as we all have seen it. It didn't turn in my direction. It was simply moving wherever it was heading, and that was it. I'm uncertain as to whether or not it even knew I was there at the time or not. So I started to walk back to where Kyle was, and I told him all about it at this time. He was astonished at what I said, and we went back to the same area to find the bull, which we did. Working into what was now the dark of night, butchering the bull, bagging it, and loading it into the truck, we were on edge, knowing what may be lurking still nearby. There was no damage to the bull when we found it, so this creature hadn't done anything to it, which had been a concern of mine. You can't believe the conversation surrounding this that developed over the night, all of us drinking bourbon and kicking it around for hours on end. We still hunt there annually, with nothing else having been seen over the years. Was this creature and others like it living there on an ongoing basis? I don't know. I know what I saw that day and the tracks that Kyle and I had seen on the muddy road. Interesting, huh, Kev?
Pretty wild.
Yeah.
Elk hunting and having a Bigfoot walkout, huh?
That is the only account I've ever received out of New Mexico, I believe.
Well, it's a rural place. I talked about it a few weeks back when I was fly fishing out there in the northeast corner of New Mexico on the San Juan River. And, man, there is not much out there. I saw elk, and they were saying, don't drive your car in the evening, after the sun goes down, because they said it's like a petting zoo out there. Cougars, elk, everything.
Everything comes out at night. Yeah. And, I mean, I haven't been there, so I don't know what the lay of the land is. When I think of Bigfoot, I think of areas of dense forest, lakes, rivers, and streams, perhaps some farming areas and whatnot. That seems to me to be choice property for large animals, you know.
Yeah.
But you get into some of these areas, like the fellow I was interviewing night before last. He was in an area of north of Phoenix for one of the sightings or evidential finds, I'll call it. And he said there was an area there that was like desert, and yet there was a river there. And if you moved away from that desert type area, you started to get into a little mountainous area where there were trees and grass. So there was a real cornucopia, if you will, of different, a variety of landscapes. You know?
Yeah, well, and that's how Phoenix is. I imagine I haven't been all over New Mexico, but I said Phoenix. That's how Arizona is. I used to live in Phoenix, as you know, and Arizona is like kind of what you would learn in earth science when you were a kid in 7th or 8th grade, where they would tell you how the landscape changes and the flora and fauna change with elevation, because basically
Yes.
you start out in what they call the Valley of the Sun, where Phoenix is, and head north, like you're talking, and you just keep climbing up and up and up. And before you know it, when you get up to Flagstaff, it's really tall pine trees and, relatively dense pine trees in the forest there,
Yeah, and of course you can get into some canyon areas over there.
Sure, super cool.
He was talking about the different mule deer, javelina.
Yeah, javelina hogs. They're cool.
Yeah, little pigs and cougars and apparently Bigfoot.
Yeah.
So, where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, anywhere you have food sources, water sources, there's potentially life around there, and there generally is.
Yeah, and also up north, too, in northern Arizona, and I'm sure New Mexico, too. When you get up at elevation, the temperature or the climate is a lot more moderate, too, which is good for a Bigfoot compared to being in the 120-degree desert,
Yeah, and the funny thing, too, Kev, about nature or critters, like even in my yard, sometimes I go out there and I say, oh, there's no birds around today, which I usually attribute to a hawk being around. But if you walk around carefully and slowly and allow your eyes to focus on the bushes, you look around and you say, oh, shoot, there's a little sparrow in that bush. And then you look over here and there's a finch over there. And unless you're really looking and concentrating, you don't see the wildlife that's around you. Some of these things are hiding.
Yeah.
And it's the same for the cougars, the Bigfoot. They're not necessarily going to jump out, nor do they want to jump out and let you see them.
No, it's a great point, Bill. Anything you're looking for, you really have to stop and look for it. Like I remember years ago when my kids were little and I lived in the Pacific Northwest, we went out for the first time to these tidal pools on coastal Oregon. And, we'd meet with the park ranger, for the kids' sake, and they would tell us, oh, you could find this, sea urchins and sea anemones and, sea cucumbers, all these little things in these tidal pools. And the first time we were down there, like first time in the morning, I was like, man, I don't see anything. And the kids, because they were closer to the ground, they were like, no, look, there it is. There's one, because they were closer to the ground in the pool, and they were studying it, whereas I was up, 4 or 5 feet high or 4 feet high or whatever, and I didn't see it until I bent down and stayed still, and then I was like, oh, look at that,
Right.
And these tidal pools were just full of life. But,
that focused gaze,
Yeah.
it required a focused, your attention focused on what you were looking at.
100%, yeah.
Now, I have one more, not too long, this account. Now, many of you folks that listen to the podcast hear me talking about my friend Dave in Oregon. And this fellow, Kelly, actually came to me, a good friend of Dave's, He's not a logger or not involved in the logging industry, but I found it fascinating talking to Kelly as a Long Islander and involved in everyday life over here, how different people live around the country. And you're going to hear what Kelly was doing at the time to make some money. I would never even think of doing what he was doing. And here he is, as you're about to hear. Now, this also occurred in the Salmonberry Canyon in Oregon, which is a place of vast wilderness where the loggers have been working for decades and decades. Now, in case you're of the mindset that loggers are out there just ransacking the countryside, destroying everything in sight and leaving a rubble field, it's not that way. They go into these areas and they actually plant and harvest generationally like farmers. The trees growing very well in these areas. So they go in, they harvest an area, they come out, maybe 40 years later, a crew is back in there doing it again in the same spot. So now listen, as I begin to share with you Kelly's account, in 1986, Bill, I was 22 years old, working many different jobs during the year to make a buck. For several years, come September, another fellow and I worked for a contractor in the deep woods, cutting boughs from noble pines for decor during the Christmas season. We were working a ridgeline in the Salmonberry Canyon above Blue Lake. The road leading into this area was actually an old logging road, extending some 20 miles from the nearest main road. The fellow I worked with drove in and out daily 7 days a week, while I had brought in my 60s era 14-foot Aloha trailer to stay in. Once a week, I would leave to go into town to take a shower, get food, and clean all my clothes. Besides that, I was in the woods for several months through November performing the work. So we would put together 300 to 400 pound bales, followed by a Gazelle helicopter coming in once a week to extract them. It was quite an operation. I had parked my trailer in a junction of 4 old dirt roads, part of an old logging camp from the 30s, with nothing left except some old wooden foundations. It was an area of, say, 50 by 150 feet, filled with 2-foot-tall grass surrounded by dense timber on all sides. There was also nearby my encampment what is known as a helicopter pond, an artificial pond set in place for use by firefighters and helicopters during a forest fire. So the two of us didn't work with each other, but rather in 2 different areas along the ridge, seeing each other in passing during the day, and that was it. I had a dog at the time that stayed with me that was half wolf and half Siberian husky. She would stay laying at the base of the tree in which I was working, asleep, somehow knowing that the boughs I would drop fell outside of where she was. I just find that funny. In the weeks following, my dog started to what I will call stand guard rather than sleep, which was very unusual for her. This went on for about 2 weeks when my partner, for whatever reason, decided to leave for the weekend, leaving me to work alone. As I said, he would drive in and out every day while I spent the night in my trailer. Early in the week, before my partner had left for the weekend, I had brought my dog home, being worried about her behavior, and in the process, I left my .357 on the table after cleaning it. I always carried my pistol and was now unarmed without my dog back in the timber. The fog was laying heavy in this valley, very thick that night, as I lay on the bunk in the back of this little trailer resting. I should tell you that at the time, the name Bigfoot was not found in my vocabulary, a fact that would change later in life. So I was resting when something slapped the trailer right next to my head, and I slid down to the floor. My first thought was that my friend Dave, funny, hello Dave and Kelly, he was thinking at the time Dave had snuck up on him. He said, my first thought at the time was that my friend Dave and perhaps somebody else had come in there to screw with me, knowing I was alone. But I was shaken. And all I had was a knife as I was now lying on the floor of this trailer. 4 or 5 times over a period of about 90 minutes, the trailer got slapped in the same spot, with all the curtains drawn on the trailer. Now, in a panic, sensing real danger, I realized the hair on the back of my neck was standing up like a wire brush. My Bronco was parked some 40 feet from the trailer. And grabbing my keys, I threw open the door, screaming at the top of the lungs, and made a beeline for the Bronco. I remember not looking to the left or to the right. I was wholly focused on my escape from whatever this was. Now in my truck with the lights on in the wet grass, I could see no vehicle tracks. I could see no vehicle tracks, and I began to drive. I scoured the area looking for people, wholly convinced that it was in fact a human that had hassled me, and I found nothing. As I said, I thought it may have been my friend Dave, even though he had never done anything like that before. Finally now, several miles away, I stopped, still in the woods, and I fell asleep, waking up at the break of day. Now, back at camp, the soaking wet grass surrounding my trailer was matted down, with no tracks visible. I could also see a distinct trail in the grass that something had made, leaving the forest and returning to it north of my location. As you know, Bill, this was to be the same area where Dave and others had numerous sightings occurring 20-something years later. So there you have it, Kev. You know, he didn't see a Bigfoot, but something, as he said, was slapping. And I picture myself with an open hand, bam, whacking the side of this trailer. And I thought to myself, a bear doesn't do that. They kind of reach around, they put their paws up on it and shove it, right. But a slap, like wham. And numerous times while he was in there, and then he catches coming back, having slept in the woods, coming back, he sees that surrounding the trailer, the whole area was matted down. Something was actually walking around his trailer. And then with a trail going up through the grass into the woods, and then, of course, probably the same trail that it came back down in. Very interesting, huh?
Yeah, good, strong evidence, right?
You would think, what else slaps? And when a guy like him says it was slap, we both know what he was talking about, that open-handed wham on the side of this aluminum, fiberglass, whatever this trailer was made out of,
Right.
And like Kelly said, Bill, as you know now, this is the same area that Dave and the loggers had numerous. They're still finding. I told you about Dave the other night. He was in a clearing. He goes in with a logging truck at about 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning in the dark to take out the first loads of logs before daylight.
Right.
There's guys working in the woods, and basically it's all lit up on the landing area, and they're trimming up these logs, stacking the trucks, and they start to haul stuff to the mills very early in the morning. Well, they were there, I guess, about a month ago. Dave in the middle of the night with another guy, and they're standing there. And they were in a clear cut, an area that had been taken down with woods 50 yards away from them. And something let out a horrific scream. And Dave said, like he knew it was in this woods 50 yards away. This wasn't coming from a half a mile away.
Right.
Following the scream, as the two of these guys are standing there, whoop, whoop, whoop. And I thought that was fascinating that it was a scream followed by a few whoops. And I said to Dave, you and I know, Dave, this thing just wanted you to know it was there. And who knows if it was trying to contact you, scare you. We don't know the how and the why, but this thing was at close quarters to these two guys in the middle of the night watching them. So,
creepy stuff.
Yeah, real creepy. And that's why I always say, always carry more gun. And you see how Kelly was upset, to say the least, that he left his 357 on the trailer back home and had come back into the woods without the gun and without this Siberian wolf mix. Jeez. You can imagine what this hound looked like.
Yeah, I might take the Siberian wolf over the gun.
Yeah, while she's wrangling with the Bigfoot, he could at least, I don't know if he'd stay with your dog or get the heck out of there and hope for the best,
Yeah, I don't have to aim a wolf. It's a heat-seeking beast.
When you see a wolf start snarling, they're down to business,
No doubt.
They're gonna go snarling, snapping, biting, and ravaging whatever they're attacking.
Go get them.
Go get them, Fang. So,
awesome.
Kev, what do we have in our cryptids in the news and other oddities segment?
Yeah, I've been hearing about this a lot, and folks, you could say I'm behind the times or whatever, but Bill, you and I haven't talked about it either, as I recall. But today we're going to go into the news, and we're going to talk about the Nazca Mummies.
Oh.
Have you read about these? Sometimes they call them the tridactyls because they have 3 fingers instead of 5. These mummies that they found.
No, I'm familiar with the Nazca lines.
Oh, yeah, same place in Peru.
Yeah.
And a lot of mystery happens down there, but you got to check these out, the Nazca Mummies.
Wow,
so,
okay.
These are two mummies that they found going back here in 2017, so fairly recently, right?
Right.
And they found these 2 mummies. One appears to be a male or a female, and they have funny names for them, like, Maria, and I forget the other one's name. But it turns out that, they're kind of odd looking. They're in like a fetal position, but they're full grown, kind of arms across their knees, folded up to their chests, right?
Right.
And
like they were posed when they were put there.
Yeah, or they just, died that way, in that position. Who knows?
Uh-huh.
Not necessarily that someone put them in that position. It's a natural position.
Okay.
For you or I to be in. But what's really interesting about it, several things. One is that their skulls look different than our skulls. But they are humanoid. It's not a monkey or something like that.
Right.
But the skull is larger and elongated. Okay.
Yes.
And we've seen that before. Like down there, also they found very well documented what are called the Paracas skulls. Where they're very elongated at the top.
Yes, I've seen them.
You've seen those.
Yeah,
So
yep.
this is similar, not quite as exaggerated, but definitely elongated and bigger than a human skull. And then the eyes appear to be much bigger as well. So, it looks a little bit of what we would say like alien-like, right?
Yeah, we think of those big bulbous heads, narrow jaw.
Yep. But what's super interesting here now, they think the younger one, I think it's Maria, is 1,700 years old.
Wow.
and clearly has different structure. But what's really interesting is that 75% of the DNA does not match up with the human genome.
That is like really substantial.
Very substantial.
Considering between us and a chimpanzee, it's like, what is it, like 1%?
Something like that.
It's a minuscule amount, does not match with ours.
Yeah.
But the rest shows as human.
No, and also this 75% doesn't show up in any of the database. So, like, it's unknown.
Right. Completely unique.
It's not like it's apes or something like that.
Right.
Now, what's interesting here is, of course, there's a lot of scientific stuff that says, like, doctors and scientists studying these, and of course they're doing the DNA testing, and they really think it's genuine. But then, of course, there's a whole group that says, no, it's fake, it's a hoax. But what's really interesting to me is, like, for someone to hoax this that long ago, like if you think someone created these things 1,000 years ago, why would they do it?
Yeah, not likely.
And then for someone to hoax it today and make it seem like it's that old, well, yeah, you could see why they would do it, but how would they do it, right?
Yeah.
And then I think possibly the most interesting thing when I read about these mummies and the debate about them in the scientific and academic community, the debate about the authenticity is, like, it's interesting because it would, if it's true, it would completely challenge much of our history. And a lot of the stuff that we said about, how humans formed and stuff could be wrong. So, when you read about this, folks that are the believers will say, well, a lot of these academics and stuff like that, they don't want to say it's real because then it would say everything they did to this date is wrong, right? Which is real. Like if you're pursuing funding for your research and stuff like that, it's hard for you to come in and say, these guys are right. I was wrong for the last 20 years.
Which, Kev, is part of the problem we have societally. A lot of things are driven by money. And even if somebody is derailed in what they've been investigating and thinking for so long, and really even in their own mind and heart realize, like, well, I was wrong about this, they will stay on the trail till retirement because they've got so much time and effort and money invested in this, and they don't want to just walk away.
Right. And then the other, school of thought of, the motivation of some of the doubters is this could be a little bit like the UAP and UFO stuff that I've been talking about the past, couple of months, is that it could be too scary for society to know, or deemed too scary or too frightening for society to know. Like if you look back and you say, hey, in ancient Peru, that was actually aliens living there, and not humans.
Right? Now, there were, when those other initial skulls were found, just skulls, with the elongated, the apex of the skull being elongated. It looked like it was stretched out.
Yeah.
There were those who theorized that even today, in some remote locations, there are some tribes, groupings of people, where from their youth, they practice this head wrapping or banding around the skull that if started from a young enough age, when, like, a lot of people don't know, I learned this in A&P, when a child is born, there's actually a soft spot on the top of the skull. That's why you
mean anatomy and physiology, not the old A&P supermarket.
Right. That's correct. That wasn't an A&P
because I learned a lot when I worked in the A&P supermarket. Different stuff.
And so it's not until a certain age that the skull as we have it as adults is kind of solidified. That's why you have to use caution with small children handling them and protecting them. But there's a belief that this banding reshaped the skull and the formation and growth of it at an early age. So once it solidified, that was it. You had this odd shape from this gentle squeezing or pressure being applied on these bones, causing them to kind of squeeze together and push up, if you will, and forming into these skull shapes. It's a theory, right?
No, certainly a logical explanation, though.
Yeah.
Not one of pure denial.
Right. It could have happened,
Right. Now, this with the DNA, now you'll read about the DNA, and some of the experts will be like, well, it's DNA contamination. It's too old for the DNA to be measured accurately. But I don't know. There's something here. And then, I didn't go into it here with the whole mummy discussion, but the CAT scans and that definitely, look authentic. To some experts, and then you have the doubting Thomases saying it's a hoax. So
right.
I don't know, folks, you take a look at this stuff, write in at Bigfoot Terror in the Woods under Contact Us. Let us know what you think. I don't know what to think. It's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is compelling. And the problem is, we don't spend enough time or effort. There's such disinterest in oddities that it's almost just like swept away. Like, almost like, who cares about that? What's on TikTok? Yeah, I mean, whereas there's a whole other group of people like ourselves and many of our listeners who find these things just fundamentally very interesting. I don't know how you could just walk by it and at least not give it a second thought.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of stuff going on out there, and when I'm talking to Dave and Kelly and all the other people I interview, and I was having a conversation with a fella in northern Tennessee last night that had some UFO encounters in his life and his descriptions of what he saw and where he was. I'm fascinated by it, because obviously this guy just thought enough to have a conversation with me and speak to somebody who would listen to him about what he had seen. And the fact of the matter is, Kev, what he has seen, I have seen.
Right.
And many others have seen. So when he's describing it, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I saw.
Yeah. And here, I mean, just to wrap it up a little, so it's kind of, let's talk a minute about if it's real or if it's a hoax. So, in scenario A, if they are in fact real, these two mummies, it could potentially be the greatest biological discovery in history, and it implies either an unknown branch of evolution or some type of extraterrestrial visitation. But, getting back to what I was talking about, then history, textbooks, biology, could require a fundamental rewriting.
Right. Well,
so it's certainly would be controversial, very controversial, if it's real. And then if they're hoaxes, it represents a pretty sophisticated crime that probably also includes the desecration of, ancient heritage sites, the mutilation of genuine, ancient human remains, and then, the complete exploitation of the general public's curiosity for profit, right? So it's, so you say, where are we now? What's the status? And it's undergoing more investigation by the Peruvian Ministry of Culture. And I guess the most controversial thing, which I didn't explicitly mention, is, the government down there, which isn't necessarily a huge red flag to me. They're not very open to having unrestricted independent study of these remains, but they're their THEIR remains. So I don't blame them for protecting them a little bit.
And along with that, Kev, though, you and I and everybody else knows that there are many governmental bodies or entities on this planet that are sitting outside of what we would call mainstream interests. they're protected. They're there. They're entities. They're countries, but they're not really contributing to the whole of society. I don't know if I worded that right, but they're just kind of okay, but they're not really involved intimately with other governments and people that may be in a better position to help them to study or to look at these things. They're not that willing to invite us in,
Right.
So it's interesting. It's
definitely interesting stuff. So, I don't know what to think, folks. Let us know. Again, go to BigfootTerryInTheWoods.com under the Contact Us tab and send us an email. Let us know what you think, especially if you, have done anything related to these Nazca mummies or what are known as the tridactyls.
Now, you think these mummies were buried there, or because I'm thinking of a couple of people like huddled together on a bitter cold night, unprepared, and they just die.
Yeah.
They happen to be.
I don't recall if they were buried or how they found them.
Okay.
They do look like they might have been, encapsulated in something, They're kind of white in color, like, almost like they're made out of marble, but they're not, of course.
Yeah. Interesting. So what do we have, Kev? Listener mail.
Yeah, we got a couple of good listener mails. So Robin writes in. Robin doesn't say where they are from, or I can't tell, whether it's male or female.
Well, Robin came from Batman's mansion, of course.
Exactly, from the Batcave. So they write in, so enjoying the new format. It's nice to get longer, more detailed stories of Bigfoot. I had quit listening for a while, but this move has renewed my interest. Good decision, boys. Robin. So thanks for the feedback, Robin. We've gotten a lot of feedback like that.
Interesting.
And then finally, the letter I picked is from our friend Lee in Minnesota.
Okay.
And I don't know if you saw this, Bill. Lee sent in a picture, too, and he says, this spring I made a Bigfoot that was supposed to be an auction item for the Blessing of the Bikes event. Unfortunately, the weather was terrible, and we had to cancel the entire event. So it now resides in my yard. He's 8'4" tall and 4 feet wide, and he has a mouth full of pointy teeth and eyes that glow red. I thought I would help him get in the holiday spirit and bought him a bright red Santa hat to match his eyes. Lee from Minnesota. And yeah, did you see that picture, Bill? It looks a lot like your Bigfoot, by the way.
Yeah, it's amazing. I wonder if he stole the idea from me or he just came up with it again on his own,
I know, but it is super cool. And the Santa hat, I love the fact that the red Santa hat matches his eyes. That's awesome.
Oh, man. Well, that's fantastic. And folks, we thank you for joining us. And remember, if you find yourself marching around on the hunt in New Mexico, or perhaps even the Olympic National Forest, or the Salmonberry Canyon, you best remember one thing, my friends. Always carry more gun than you think you're going to need. Sleep tight.